Good evening, everyone.
Kavod Darav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. So we gave a class tonight about the simanim, with a lot of details. So if you want to see about the simanim, look at that class tonight. Okay. Okay, so it says here in Dalet, Maim sheshatum mehem tanagolim, right? We're talking about water that they drank from it, the chickens. Katuv Tumah edition says in there in Tumah edition, the Ishlif Sol, we should disqualify this. Miditran, it says in Para Aduma, Kola Ofot Poslin Meme Chatat. So it says all the birds disqualify water purification. Chutz min hayona, except the pigeon, mipnei shehi motzetzet. So why is the pigeon different? Because it sucks the water, like a suckling, as opposed to the other birds, which probably also spit it out a little bit, regurgitate it, whatever. Rashi explains, תשאר עופות אינם מוצצים אלא מגביהים פיהן אחר שקלטו מן המים והמים נופלים מפיהן. Right, so that's exactly what Rashi says, right? That what happens is with the other birds is that the water falls out of their mouth, goes back into the vessel, whatever. So therefore it's considered to be water which was already, used. But it says in Tosfot חולקין על פירוש Rashi. They don't agree with Rashi. The ma melacha is shayach b'shtiyah. So he says, what labor is there in drinking? In other words, what kind of usage is that? וכן יראה להוכיח מאור זרוע. It says also from Or Zarua, he learns like that. שכתב דמים שלקלק בהם כלב, right, the מים if you have it, like, let's say, right, the water which was, lapped by the dog, פסולין נטילת ידיים, so that's disqualified. משמע השאר בהמות וחיות, לא. So that implies that when it comes to other animals or birds, whatever, so it's not relevant. ואש שייך עשיית מלאכה בשתיית, so it's relevant to say that, sort of like a usage because of drinking. אפילו שאר בהמות וחיה נמי, so that also all the other animals also would have this issue as well. Okay, let's go on. וטור נרד אפילו לפירוש רש"י, so it seems also that according to Rashi, דווקא במי חטאת פסלה, that it disqualifies regarding the waters of purification, right? Of שאר עופות בשתייה, the other birds, when it comes to drinking, מים שנפלו בפיהם, water that fell out of their mouth, אבל לנטילת יד, when it comes to washing your hands, he says, ודאי בטלין במיעוטן. So he says it's really like it's nullified, right? It's a small minority inside the water. And that's the way it's proven by what is written in the Mishnah. It says there that if the ink fell in there into that liquid or whatever, the Chura had kind of shared this whole discussion there. So it's difficult for me, says but Yosef, Ken, my Tama de Or Zarua. What's the reason the Or Zarua says the Pasal that he disqualifies the click when the dog lapped from it? לכן נראה לי דאור זרוע סבר דמים ששתו מהם כל בהמה. So it seems like it says the Or Zarua holds that water that they drank from it, right? Some animal, or whatever, b'chayav pesulin, they're disqualified. V'kelev nakat deguma. So he says the dog is just an example, but really we're talking about every animal. Ela aikara dedina yesh litmoa, but he says there's still wonderment regarding the the law here. Demicha shiva tve melecha shtiyata pot me'adiach behem kelim. Right. So he says, is it true? Is it more severe, the drinking of the birds, right? Mediach kelim mudachim or chadashim. Right. So in other words, he's trying to ask you like this. The question is, when the birds drink from the water, is it considered to be like it was used to wash dirty dishes or clean dishes? Right. Which one is it? In other words, is the water disgusting afterwards or not? Right. It's not drinkable anymore. Oh, in tava behem nachtom. This is if also the the baker, right, put his hands in there, dipped his hands in there, as we said, talked about last week. Yadav shehem kisharim, this is the kosher for washing your hands. Natilat yadayim. Afilu. So it says even lemay de pirish Rashi, even according to Rashi explains the Talmud the pisula the mine, that the reason why we disqualify the water shatuk ben ofot, that the water was drank by the birds, man who mipnei shenaseh ben melacha, because there was labor done there. Ikar memar, so he says there is to say the shani mi chatat. So he says, but you know what? You know the water's purification is different. It's not the same thing as washing your hands. Because there, you know, the Torah is more stringent regarding that process there, much more than mundane things, you know, like washing your hands. So he says, therefore, you know, with some kind of like a little kind of thing there, like manipulation like this, it's considered to be even something small. It's considered to be a problem, you know, problematic with this, like you're doing labor with it. When it comes to washing your hands, though, it's not really considered to be like you're doing labor with it, with this kind of a, you know, minuscule kind of usage. Whatever. Okay, so that's what he's saying here. Interesting. Okay, so we'll do Shulchan Aruch. We'll see where we stand over here. Yeah, so it says here, Maim sheshatu mem tanagolim, right? As we said, if the water, right, they drank from it, the chickens, whatever, or shelakak behem shtitrum keleb, or it was lapped by the dog. He's drinking from there. Right? Yesh mi sheposel ben devrav nirin. So it says there is one that says that this water is disqualified, right, from washing hands, but he says it doesn't seem right, this opinion. Okay. So yeah, he's rejecting that opinion because you know it's not really something heavy duty usage, right? That's what he's trying to say. Not really significant usage there involved. אלא בין באלו בין בכך בין, בכל שאר הבהמה, החיה והעוף, יש להכשיר. So he says the truth is, right, that you can use any water which was used to drink by, some animal. Wow, interesting. Okay, well, I hope we don't have to find out, practically about this one to have to do this. Not exactly my cup of tea, but okay, tell you. It's good to know at least that it's kosher, right? In a time of need, whatever. Okay, so maybe we can see some Mishnah Berurah here to see what it says about this. Interesting. Mhm. Right, so he explains the other side of the coin right here, the Mishnah Berurah, which is that he says the ones who are stringent about this, what they're saying is basically right that you have the saliva of the animal, mixed into that water, which is not really very pleasant, as you can imagine, or some mucus, from the mouth of the animal. So it's not exactly a very pleasant thing. But I guess, right, the bottom line is that we say anyway it's allowed because it's a very small minority of stuff mixed in there, so it's like negligible. Okay. For us, it's so hard to imagine things like this because we're so fastidious, about the cleanliness of water, and we have, filters and all kinds of things that we use, to cleanse the water, to purify the water, so we're very, very, very sensitive about these things. Okay. Anyway, it's good to know. So we'll go back to the order of business over here, which is Dal. Hey, okay, let's go to Hey. So it says here, Nireh Milashon Rambam. It seems from language of Rambam, he says, Shima sam melachto b'mei mikveh, או מי מעיין בעודן מחוברים, לא נפסלו. Right, so he says, oh, good point, right? He says that if you did, let's say, you took some mikveh water or well water, right, or something, spring water, things like this, it's not disqualified by doing labor there, some usage there. Because you're right, that all water that was done with some labor, nasu shofchin, it becomes like basically wastewater, right? Once you do labor with there. Right, that's the whole point. That's the reason why we don't want that. Becomes like wastewater. So you don't want to use wastewater to wash your hands. Upsolin. That's why it becomes disqualified. Netilat yadayim. Kitzad maim sheovin sheyadiach behem kelim. Right. So it's talking about over there drawn water, right? You wash dishes with that. Or sheshara behem pito, or he right dipped his bread in there, as we said. Things like this. Ben bekelim, ben bekarkaot. Whether it's in the vessel or on the ground, psulin netilat yadayim. They're disqualified. Mashma davka b'sheovin b'sala. So it implies from there that's only a problem with drawn water, right? As opposed to mikveh water, which is, pure, right? And therefore, it doesn't really get disqualified by these types of usage because it retains its purity, because of its unique, right, status as a mikveh. Yeah, that's a good point. But I'm sure that has a limit also, even the mikveh, because once the water already looks different, and has a color and stuff like that, so there we're probably going to be more stringent about it, if I remember correctly, from the stuff that we learned already last week or whatever before. كتب رمام أمرام كي قالوا يصير أتم. So also there's another question, right? Which is that what about if the water was left open, uncovered, and in some instances when the water is uncovered, it becomes disqualified for drinking because there's a danger to drink that water if it was left uncovered. Even though today, by the way, we're not so stringent with that because the original reason why they made that decree not to drink uncovered water was because of snakes. They may put venom in there, deposit venom. So nowadays snakes are not really very common amongst us, right, where we live. We have other problems besides snakes. I'm not going to get into all the problems we have. I don't want to remind you of all the problems of the unpleasant things, but right. So snakes, are not so common. So therefore, the rabbis, right, were not so stringent anymore like they used to be in the old days. But anyway, right, the Rambam says that if the water was left uncovered, and halachically it's now forbidden to use that as drinking water. So then what happens, right? So says the Bet Yosef, Perek Bab Minchot Birachot. It's over there in the laws of blessings. When Yesh Tamo B'Yamin on Perek Zayin de Avodah Zarah. So it seems like the reason is we say in Avodah Zarah, seventh chapter, the Maim Shnitgalu Lo Yirchatz Be'em Panav B'Yadav V'Raglav. Right. So it says there that you shouldn't wash your hands with water which was left uncovered. So it's according to this, it says it's good what Rabbeinu wrote, right, which is talking about the Torah. Right. So again, right, he says exactly what I just mentioned. That nowadays, since we're not concerned about, water which is uncovered, so it could be that's kosher also to wash your hands as well. So it says, even though we're not concerned, you shouldn't say that since we're not concerned about uncovered water, and therefore it's allowed to drink. You may think, well, it's still disqualified for washing hands, regarding water which was labor was done with it. And also, let's say the appearance was changed. Even though it's allowed to drink that water, when it comes to washing, you're not allowed to. So he says that's because the taste has been nullified. So it's considered like before Shanit Galu, before God revealed. Interesting. Okay. Okay, so we'll see this in Shulchan Aruch, which is Vav. Hey, I'm sorry. Hey, Vav is the next one. Okay, so let's see that. Right, so it says here, "En melacha poseh b'mayim shovim." As we said, right, the labor only disqualifies when you have drawn water. Ben shen b'kli ben shehu b'karka, whether it's in the vessel or on the ground. But when it comes to mikveh water, as we said, or mayan or spring water, bildam mechubarim, right? Well, they're still attached to the source. So there, we say that the labor will not disqualify it because it's the purity of that water is unshakable, and stays because it's a mikveh. That's the reason. Okay, interesting. Well, so I guess we can go to Vav, unless you have any questions there. So it says here, Chamei or notelin mehem liadayim. So I'm sorry, before we go on, just to recap, what did we say regarding water which is covered, uncovered, so et cetera, right? What's the conclusion with that? Because Shulchan Aruch really didn't talk about that, but we did talk about it in the Bit Yosef. So it seems like the conclusion of the Bit Yosef was, just to see this through the end, right? This whole idea, the conclusion apparently was that nowadays, since we're not really concerned about water which is left uncovered, so therefore the rule is that you can still wash your hands with it, because the whole thing was because that we didn't drink it. It wasn't drinkable, so therefore it's not usable for washing either. So now that it's drinkable, it's also usable for washing. Right? So therefore, if the water was left uncovered, there's really no problem to use that to wash your hands. Yeah, which reminds me, by the way, of there's a lot of people who take the stringency that what they do is they leave like water by the bed, so then when they get up in the morning, the first thing that they do is to wash their hands before they get up out of the bed, because according to the Zohar, right, you're not supposed to walk around before you wash your hands. It says some very severe language about that in the Zohar Kadosh. So a lot of people are stringent about that. But just to remind you that I think I've told some people already about this a couple of times, that my Rabbi Maran Shalom Ravadia, he didn't like this method that people are doing, right? Some people, they're washing their hands right when they get out of bed, like when they when they sit up, they wash their hands in bed. Not such a good idea, the rabbi said. And what's the reason why? Because the problem is that usually you have to use a bathroom when you wake up in the morning, so you really shouldn't be blessing, on the washing when you have to use a bathroom, you know. Um, so if you're gonna tell me, well, I'll use the bathroom and then I'll bless later, but the problem is that that's also not a good option because some poskim say that you're not allowed to bless later. You have to bless right away when you wash. So therefore, right, the rabbi he ruled out this whole thing, right, this whole scheme. He wasn't really supporting this kind of thing. So the way he did it, himself, and also the way he told us to do it, whatever, was to first get up in the morning, right, and go use a bathroom. Number one thing, right, use a bathroom, and then once you come out, and then you can wash your hands, right, with a cup and everything, and make a blessing, because this way, you can bless. You're not right. You don't have a belly full of right urine inside of you, whatever, right? Which is not a good thing, when you're blessing, making a blessing, right? You don't want that. So this is the reason why the rabbi tried to discourage this kind of thing. So regarding right what the Zohar said that there's a danger involved. When you're walking around, is liable to death. If he walks around without washing his hands. So the rabbi had also a solution for that. In other words, theoretical solution, which was that there's like there's like a double doubt over there, because some say, Tosfot says that now the evil spirit, is not found amongst us, right? Even though there are others that don't agree with this, but they do agree, that it's weaker than it used to be. It's not the same level, so therefore it's not so dangerous anymore to walk around, before you wash your hands like it used to be in the old days. That's one thing, There's also another right doubt, which is that there are some poskim who say in the Rishonim that the whole house is considered to be like one, right? Like 4 amot, like one domain, whatever. So therefore, it's not considered like you're really walking around, in like in a large space, whatever, in a large area, because the house is like one area, it's like one place. So therefore, because of these two things, these two doubts, whatever. So the rabbi said there's definitely, room to be lenient, right? And regarding that, and not wash your hands when you right sit up from the bed, whatever. So that's
Isn't
why,
it,
yeah.
isn't it though that some people do like Birkat Hashakar, like in they do the thing and they say the blessing and they do the thing.
So what was that again?
So I thought that some people would did that with the washing their hands because they do Birkat Hashakar like I don't they open their eyes and they say that blessing and then they'll sit up and they'll say that the straightens the bent they do that each piece of the morning blessing as they do it as they get out of bed.
Um, yeah, so I'm not really sure what you're saying because you're
I
talking
was
about Asher Yatzar, you're talking about?
not a Shariat Sar, no, so I was told that they wash their hands, or that some people would wash their hands because then they go into the morning blessing, the Birkat HaShakar.
Right, Birkat HaShachar, yes, yes.
Okay. And they'll say um, who opens my eyes and they'll open their eyes and then
Right.
releases the bound and they'll start to move and then straightens the bent and they'll sit up and then before they say the part about puts the earth upon the waters they'll step on the ground like
Right.
that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The truth is, the thing is that the custom nowadays is not like that, really.
Not like that. Okay.
Yeah, but also there's another issue, which is that you're making blessings, when you have to use the bathroom, which is not really the proper thing to do. You should first, make sure your bowels are all clean before you before you start blessing anything.
Some of us get up a couple times a night. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah, people get up, but still, when you're waking up in the morning, usually like you need to use the bathroom, you know what I mean? So, so therefore it's not really such a great thing. Whatever, that's the thing, so that's why we're not so particular about that anymore. So yeah, the preferred probably way nowadays, is probably this way, because of all these issues that we mentioned. So therefore what you should do is use the bathroom first, and get dressed, whatever, to a certain extent, you can make a blessing, right? Don't walk around naked, you know what I mean? And then go and to the kitchen, whatever, wash your hands, and make a blessing and start over there. And start with your blessings and all the whole thing, right? The whole ritual. Okay, whatever. Just telling you that because
That's what I do, but is
yeah.
it okay to like if we get it out of order, if we like if we were to say a Yatzar before, or if we were to say the morning
So
blessing before?
lechatchila, you should try to do everything in order. That's the proper thing to do. First Netilat Yadayim, then Asher Yatzar, and then right Birkat Hashachar. That's the way it should be. Lechatchila. Everything should be in order. So it depends, whatever, but that's the way it should be done. Lechatchila, whatever. So there's always things to do. If you didn't have everything in the proper order, there's ways to to deal with that. But that's the way it should be, more or less. So that's the proper way to do it. Okay, whatever. So getting back to our discussion here, right? So we're talking about water which is uncovered. So right. So we finished that. Now we're talking about the vav. So here it's talking about what? Chamei ur notrim mehen liadayim afilu hen chamin. Right, so we're talking now about hot water, right? Warm water, hot water. So it says here in the tour that if the water was heated by the fire, right? So then he says we're allowed to use them even if they're like very hot, even though it's too hot to touch, you can still use it. He says. Interesting. So says Bet Yosef regarding that the Perek Kol Abasar, right? It says in this Perek in Chulin. Kufa Amud Aleph. Itmar Chame Or Chizkiah Amar En Notrim Mehem Min Yadayim. Right, so it's a machloket in the Gemara. Chizkiah says we cannot use hot water like that. If it's made, if it's cooked, if it's boiled with a fire. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Notin, but Rabbi Yochanan says we can use it. Upasku poskim Rabbi Yochanan. So they pass like Rabbi Yochanan to be lenient. In other words, um, okay. So then, לאל מהי פלוגתא דתניא מים ראשונים נותנים בין מחמין בין מצונן. So right, so it says over there in a different place that when it comes to washing your hands, you can use whether it's hot water or cold water. So he says, well, that's only if it's not so hot, you can't touch it, right? But if it's so hot like that, then we shouldn't use them for washing your hands, he says. Some teach lo asefa achronim la asefa. They're teaching about the end of it. Achronim enotrim ela betzonen. Right. When it comes to the mayim achronim, the last water of the day of the meal, the final water, whatever. We don't use the cold water. I'm sorry. We should only use cold water. Only cold water. But not hot water. Amar Rav Yitzchak lo shanu ela sheyat tzoded ben. That's only if that's like, again, too hot to touch. But if it's not too hot to touch, nitalin they can be used. So you see from there that when it comes to the first water before the meal, even if it's too hot to touch, it's still allowed. Katua Rosh, as the Rosh, Rashba and Mordechai, all these rabbis, Telacha Kilishna Batra. So we pass like the second, like the last language text. Also the Rifs, Rambam also Zal. So it seems like they all agree here. We pass like that. With the Lokim Samag, like that Samag, Samag also Samag. The Katru, the Kilishna Kama, they wrote like the first opinion, the first text. Okay, that's pretty clear. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch there. Pretty straightforward. So it says Shulchan Aruch like this. Chamea ur, right? If you have water which was heated by the fire, we are allowed to wash hands with that. Right? Even if it's too hot to touch, right? So we pass like that. Lenient. So, but right, just to recap, we said that when it comes to mayim achronim, right, the final waters, in other words, the washing you do after the meal. Right, so there you shouldn't use water which is too hot to touch. And there's probably a good reason for that, by the way. Also, you know what the reason is why you shouldn't use that for such hot water. Because since the whole point of washing the hands after the meal is to remove, the grime off the hands, so such hot water is not going to do the job. It shouldn't be that hot, otherwise it won't do it. So that's why you don't want to use that. Also, it's not very comfortable for the hands. I mean, you're gonna burn your hands like that, but that's a different story. Okay. So, all right. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll go on. So let's go to Zion. So there we just covered the water which is heated by the fire. Now we're going to talk about hot springs and all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, so it says here, right, so he says, right, that if you have the hot springs of Tveria, which is like a famous thing, these hot springs in this town, right, which is in the north, right, close to the on the Kinneret, to the Sea of Kinneret. So regarding that, as long as it's in its place, in other words, you haven't moved it to a different place, you're allowed to dip your hands into there, right? Because after all, it's a sea, it's a lake, whatever. And so it's good. It's good. It's good. It's like a mikveh, so you can dip your hands in there. And also, it seems like we're not so concerned that it's hot. That's the other thing. We're not concerned that it's hot. So let me read this inside the tour. This way we can see the whole text from top to bottom. Yeah, so it says חמץ טבריה במקומן יכול להטביל בהם את הידיים, אבל ליטול בהם בכלי, but he says, he goes on, that if you want to put that water into a vessel, right? לא, then we're not allowed to dip the hands there. וכן אם המשיך אותו בארץ דרך חריץ. Also, he says, if he let it come out, by way of some kind of a furrow in the ground, חוץ ממקומן, out of the place that's leaving its area, ואין בהם שיעור מקווה, it doesn't have the size of mikveh, אין נוטלים מהם. So we're not allowed to use that right to dip our hands. That's what he's saying here. Okay, now we got the whole text. So now we can go back and see the with Yosef. So it says in Bet Yosef, Sham Chamet Tveria, right? We're talking about again hot springs of Tveria. Chizkiah Amar En Notlim Bahem Yadayim. So right, Chizkiah says that we're not allowed to wash our hands with that. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yochanan again, right? We see he argues with this and allows it. So the conclusion of the Gemara is that if it's in its place, then nobody argues about that. The shari that it's allowed. Mishkal minayu, but once you removed it from there, right? With some kind of vessel, then everybody agrees that it's forbidden to use that water to dip your hands in there. The paskinhu. So he says, but then when is the argument between them? Bebat bilta bar sabar mor sabar gazina bat bilta atumena mor sabar lo gazina. Right. So we're talking about where Paskal poskim ke Chizkiah de Gazar. So the paskin like Chizkiah that that is stringent here. So now Rashi explains, right, what does the language mean here? So it says right, Rashi says like this. In Koman, what does it mean? It's in its place. Bechiburan, that means it's still attached to the body of the water. Im ba le'atvil yadav. So if he's coming to dip his hands there, right, we said, as long as it's attached to the main body of water, it's fine. The kule alma shapir dame. The sham tavila alem kechol mayanot mikvaot. The shem tavila, right? So it says then they can be dipped, just like any other spring, right? They're all the same. So why not here, right? It's not any worse than any other spring. Mishkal minayu b'mana, right? But once he takes it with a utensil, right, with a vessel, lishpoch al yadav, to spill it on his hands, kedin hanetila, just like washing, then everybody agrees that it's forbidden. So he says the reason is because when the rabbis decreed to wash your hands, right, they did not decree to do with hot water. So this is not the same as what we said before, right? We were talking about water that was heated by the fire, but here this is not fire. This is hot springs. Right. So he says, right, that it's not. So then what the question remains, right, arises, what's the difference between hot springs or water that was heated on the fire? Why is one different than the other? Right, that's the question. So he answers that, right? He says that at least, when it comes to the water which is heated by the fire, originally it was kosher. In other words, there was a time when it was cold, but when it comes to the hot springs of Tveria, it was hot like from from the source. So it never was cold. So therefore, he says, right, it makes it even worse. Okay, whatever. I don't really understand how that makes a difference, but whatever, right? It is what it is. So anyway, so right now we're talking about the case where we need an explanation. So those two scenarios we said, right? They're clear. There's no question about them. But here we're talking about charitz katzar ve'amayit. So we're talking about, right, as we said, like some kind of a furrow, right? Some kind of a gutter, that comes out of the springs. So it's not a vessel, but it's also not attached to the spring anymore, right? It's going off in its own direction there. So the problem is you don't have a size of mikveh there, right, in that area, but it's attached to the mikveh. Interesting. According to Rashi, he says, it seems like even if the water is good for drinking, but and they cooled it down, it's pasul, disqualified. Why? Because since it was hot from the outset, kosher, so that never was kosher. Because if not so, he says, then he should have explained, right, that when he takes them when they're still hot, the pasal that he qualifies it there. So he says it could be that he only need to explain the only reason why it's disqualified is because they're hot. So automatically, right, implies that if they got cooled down, it's kosher. But Rabbeinu Yonah, he writes over there in this Gemara, Brachot Mem Amud Bet, that which we disqualify, right, when it comes to the hot springs of Tveria, that means b'mana, to take from with a vessel. Lo mipnei chamimut, it's not because of the heat, psulim. Because we hold that even if it's hot, too hot to touch, it's still kosher. So he says the reason that is not that. The reason is because it's very bitter. Ooh. The a person can't even drink it, right, in a pressing case. Wow. It's too bitter to drink. Oh my God. So they're not fitting to drink even for an animal. Wow. So he says, therefore, with other water that gives off hot water, like the hot springs of Tveria, if they're not so bitter, a person can drink them with difficulty. So then you can use them to wash with a vessel. Okay. Let me just see how much we got here left. No, we're almost done. Okay, so it says, that's what it says in the Rambam. So he says the reason why we disqualify is it's not fitting to drink with an animal, right? The animal can't even drink this stuff. So it says Rashba and Torah Bayit. That which Rabbeinu Yonah said, that a person can drink them with difficulty. So it's not really precise, he says. So it says it really depends on drinking of the animal, not a person drinking a person. Because there was some, like we said, close by. When it comes to drinking of man, so it says that's not really, it doesn't really affect this whole thing. It doesn't hinge on that. It's possible, it says, the mashmale zal, that they hold the badai b'shtiat adam telia milta, that it really depends on drinking of a person. So then why they say animal? Because if it wasn't disqualified for drinking an animal, adam yachol ishtotam b'shat hak. So a person can also drink that, right, with difficulty a little bit, right, with little depressing case. Regarding what Rashi explained, that they so then, right, the other case was that it came into this gutter, right, whatever, this furrow. They argued about this if the water is attached to the mikveh. If it's attached to the mikveh, he katav Rabbeinu Yonah, says Rabbeinu Yonah she'en nireh lo ken, doesn't seem right to him. Ela b'she'en shum eruv me'amayan. Rather, it says when you have no mixture from the spring, the bat bilta to the furrow, ve'en bebat bilta arba'im. And also, right, that place doesn't have 40 seah water. That's when they argued. Because if there was any mixture there from the spring, to that furrow, or if there was 40 seah, in that furrow, even according to Chizkiah, we can use that to dip the hands. About data Rashba, Kedat Rashi, but Rashi holds like Rashi. However, it says when you have 40 se'ah of water, bat bilta in that furrow, Rashi from Rashi, mashma it implies nami the matbilinan bo de adam. We can dip the hands in there. Also Rashba says that back basar. This parak, which is in Chulin, over Torah Bait, also Torah Bait. It also seems like Rabbeinu, the true like that also. Okay, let's see Shulchan Aruch and we're done. I read a little bit quickly, but we'll try to clarify everything here. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so it says in Shulchan Aruch, Chamet Tveria echol yatbil bahem et hayadayim. When hot springs of Tveria, you're allowed to dip your hands in there. But it says that's only if it's attached to the ground, right? But if you put it into a vessel, you cannot wash from there. So we said two reasons why, right? Two opinions. One was that it's because it's too hot, right? And the other one was because it's too bitter, not really drinkable, right? No. But what about if he, right? It flowed into the furrow, right? He pulled it out there, away from the place. And then it's already detached, right, from the spring. So if there's a size of mikveh there, right, in that furrow, 40 se'ah of water, so then we can dip the hands in there. But if it doesn't have that size of mikveh, so it says if this no, then it's not going to work, right? Before we get to that, it's not going to work like that. It doesn't have the size of mikveh. So now he brings another scenario, which is, what about if, right, this furrow, right, the water in there is connected to the spring itself? What about that? Because before we were talking about it's not connected. Now it is connected, right? So what happens over there? An Oveh, which the Rashba, according to Rashi and Rashba, and matbilin boyana, we're not allowed to wash your hands in there. Oh, uh-huh. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, we can't dip the hands in there. Right, so what are we talking about here? Just to clarify, right? This last piece over here. The last piece is saying like this, right? If the water is attached in the furrow, is attached to the main, right, the spring, which is the mikveh, right? So then it's a machloket between Rashi and Rashba on one side, who says we cannot use it. So why can't we use it? Because it doesn't have the size of mikveh by itself, right? So they say it's no good, but Rabbeinu Yonah says it's good. Okay. So he seems to agree with Rabbeinu Yonah here. It seems to pass like Rabbeinu Yonah. Why is that, by the way? Because as we said, right, when it comes to Netilat Yadayim, when there's a machloket, we go lenient. This is the general rule here. So here also, right, we go lenient. No problem, right? So therefore we can use it. Okay, the truth is, these kinds of scenarios we don't really have very often. But anyway, it's good to know, right? Just for, understanding things, right? Having clarity, having, right, knowledge. Okay, all kinds of good stuff there, right? Or, if you have a rainy day sometimes, right? You need some kind of solution for these things, right? So you know where to look on a rainy day, right? So, all right, very good. So I guess we'll stop there. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, we'll see you tomorrow. B'ezras Hashem, Chazak u'Baruch. And keep praying, for our amazing, amazing valiant soldiers, right, who are doing the most amazing job of wiping out these Nazis in the north and the south. Baruch Hashem, it's incredible. This is like probably, we have to probably call this miracles, what's going on here today. What I mean? It's like above nature, like the things are just, it's like this domino effect is going on here. One thing leads to another. Today there was also a lot of action. If you look what happened today, there was some incredible stuff that happened today. So whatever, I'm not going to get too much into it. Right? I'll let you look. I'll let you search for it. Bezrat Hashem. So Bezrat Hashem, we'll see you tomorrow. Laila Tov. God bless. All the best.
Thank you so much.
God bless.
Thanks, Rabbi.
God bless.